Pause for a moment, take a breath, feel awe and appreciation for being alive. You're here, present, listening. Welcome to the audio version of Awe Digital Wellness Podcast, where we explore mental health, happiness, and the beautiful, messy, complicated relationship we have with ourselves, other humans, and with technology. Make sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app and on our social medias, and more importantly, to visit and reach out to us on our website at awedigitalwellness.com. Each week, we'll dive into the science, the stories, and the practical strategies that help us thrive, both online and off, because well-being isn't about disconnecting from technology, it's about creating real connections and communicate with communities with open discussions. Even the difficult topics, we will get to it. Let's dive into this week's episode.
And we are live once again with another episode of the AWE podcast. I'm here as always with my co-host, Christian Dominique. Christian, how are you doing today?
Very good. And you, Mark?
I'm doing fantastic. As always, we are opening the chat throughout the entire podcast, open to questions. Feel free to throw into the chat. The topic for today's podcast is Comtech for real life, designing a week that works. We're going to talk about lots of different systems that people can use right now, starting today, that's going to help them get higher ROI on their time, and also at the same time avoid any distractions, whether those are digital or in the environment that they're working in. We have a lot to talk about today, a lot of interesting studies that have looked into Comtech, and it's going to be an exciting one today. Looking forward to talking to you.
Thanks, Mark. And as we're talking about the week, today's podcast is exceptionally on Thursday. So thanks for joining in. Looks like we have a lot of listeners today. Welcome. We have designed, for instance, our podcast to be on Fridays at noon, right? Consistency. There is something useful about having some set times and also useful about having some flexibility, right? So what do you think should be flexible and what do you think should be a hard, habit or design in your week?
Yeah, I think there's an active conversation to be had about the non-negotiables in the calendar, like picking up the kids or perhaps date night if you're in a relationship, even going to the gym. Those stay. But other than that, you have a lot of ambient space in your calendar just to find things to plan around. And, a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is how to actually design the week sustainably and what sort of technologies you can even use to leverage your time more. Make sure that you are not needlessly working or focusing on tasks that take up a lot of time but have very little yield. Rather than this turning just into a productivity self-help conversation, I think it's really important to tie in the neuroscience of it, really, and to understand why is it so easy for people in the first place to get sidetracked on things that feel important in the moment but are actually not important at all. Perhaps they don't even really yield much. Classic 80-20 principle. 20% of the tasks actually yield for 80% of the results, but people have a tendency to focus on the 80% for some reason because it just seems a lot more important in the moment.
Like FOMO and also like in the work culture, like urgency, right? Everything is always a fire and needs to be fixed right now. Actually, it's probably not. What's a real fire? What's the real emotion? Where should you put your time, energy, and attention? How can you foster in yourself and also as a leader in your teams, a culture of setting time up for deep work, for instance, right? So focus work, deep work, what actions are actually yielding the results that you're striving for as an individual, as an organization, as a family. And what would you say, are one or two of the frameworks that you've looked at to kind of help design a week?
I'll just put this little asterisk out there before I say anything, that these are strategies that vary by person. It's not a strategy that will necessarily work for every person. I'm not saying this is the golden rule that everybody should follow it, but I've noticed that my mind in particular works well with these strategies that I use. And I think it's worth people checking out and seeing, it's pretty much free to try these things out. So the first thing that I do, and I've been following a mentor of mine for a while, Tony Robbins, he has something called RPM, which is extremely useful. And RPM stands for Results, Purpose, Massive Action Plan. So basically what that is at the end of the day, you don't think about goals necessarily. Think about specific outcomes that you want to achieve. And it's very important to think about these outcomes in the past tense as if you had already done them. So for example, for today, I had two outcomes that I wanted to achieve. And I wrote it down. I have posted 2 videos today to my Instagram account, my YouTube account, and TikTok account. The purpose of why I want to do this, I want to raise awareness about what All Digital Wellness is doing, also about digital addiction. I want to talk about why social media addiction is so harmful for children, why that's one of the biggest epidemics that we're dealing with, perhaps one of the biggest dangers facing youth nowadays. Long term, I want to build up more influence on social media. So those are my whys, right? Those are the emotional reasons that are going to be very compelling for a lot of people. So you have the result. I've posted 2 videos today to my socials. You have the purpose, why it's important to you. Then you have to think of the massive action plan. What are the individual steps that you have to do to achieve that result? First one I have is decide on content and format for the 2 videos that I'm posting. I use AI to do that to help me think of some unique formats. Number 2, actually film the videos. Number 3, edit the videos. Number 4, post the videos. So you go in this sequential order. It's important that you also list out the amount of time that it takes for each of those things so that you can add everything up and know how long is the entire RPM block going to take. You block this in your calendar and you call it, I have posted 2 videos. Mine was a total of 3 hours to do all this stuff. I need 3 hours of no distractions, preferably in the morning, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., where I'm just focusing on filming, editing, and posting these videos. That's all I focus on. I have a special rule where I don't allow my phone in my office, right where I'm working right now. No distractions. I use app blockers, and I make sure that this time is completely dedicated to doing these tests. I'm very, I'm not trying to do it quickly. I'm not fast. I wouldn't say that I'm like very quick, but if I do it slowly, then I have a higher likelihood of actually achieving the result that I want. And there's a book that I'm going to talk about later today on the podcast, which is exactly alluding to this, which is Cal Newport's Slow Productivity. But it's basically the idea that you have these things to do and you don't necessarily want to rush through them. The brain is more attuned to doing things slowly and methodically. So I have these RPM blocks. I have a few things that I want to achieve every day, outcomes, and I block the calendar and I focus on doing those. The second thing that I do that really ensures that I actually do the thing that I say I'm going to do, there's 2 requirements for this. One, basic cooking timer that you can get on Amazon for less than $5 or just find in your kitchen somewhere. Second thing is an Excel spreadsheet or Google document. What you're going to do is you're going to basically list the entire day in 15-minute intervals, starting from, the time you wake up, 8 a.m. until 10 p.m. And then you're going to just do 15, 8:30, 8:45, and you're going to do that in the first column. Once you do that, once you start working, you take your timer, you set it to 15 minutes, right? Go. The timer's going, you're focused on doing your RPM block. And once the 15 minutes is up, it's going to start ringing. And you just go into that Excel spreadsheet. And for 8 a.m., for those 15 minutes, you just write 2 or 3 words of what you're doing right now. Then you reset the timer at 8:15. So every 15 minutes, you're doing like a little check-in with yourself. And that check-in actually makes you more accountable for what you're doing and ensures a higher likelihood to actually complete the test. I got this tip from Alex Hormozi. He recommended that. It's worked. I've tried it out since the beginning of last week. It works well for me just because it kind of, whenever I start to wane, either I look at the kitchen timer and then I get brought back to the task, or when I hear it, it's kind of like a Pavlovian signal to just focus on the task again.
The accountability and we're not saying use kind of the Pomodoro method or time block. What you're talking about is awareness. Like, what have you been doing for the last 15 minutes? How was your, a few words, a few things just to keep you in check and keep your awareness level of, we talked last week about emotions, about time. The more awareness you have about your thoughts, your emotions, your states will make you more productive, more focused, more creative, all those things that we need to do in work and in life to be more fulfilled and more give a better contribution to the world, which is what we're trying to do, right?
100%.
So just to come back to the book that you mentioned, and we'll talk about other books from Cal Newport. You talked about not having your phone even in the room, right? So also in one of his other book, Digital Minimalism, he talks about going for walks without phone and just having time where you allow yourself not to even have your phone on you. It's not that you're checking it or not. Actually, it happened to me yesterday. I went for a walk and I had my phone on me, and I just reminded myself, like, I wish I didn't have my phone on me because you're still thinking about it unconsciously. So even though you're not using it, you're thinking about it. And we know from studies that it increases anxiety. Thanks for sharing those insights. Also, I love the fact that you mentioned you put in your calendar, I have done those 2 videos. I have done X, right? So you're talking to yourself in the future as you've done it already. And that's very powerful.
Yeah, I think he even refers to a study in the book in Slow Productivity. And the study actually shows that single tasking within defined blocks, similar to like what you do with the RPM plan, improves focus quality by 23% and results in 18% faster task completion than perhaps multitasking. And the reason for that is that, again, the brain is not designed to have multiple tabs open at once. Rather, you have one tab and you focus on that. Also, having a big to-do list is really overwhelming for a lot of people. A lot of people, when they see a big to-do list, they don't even know where to start. But by chunking all these things into specific time blocks, right? Saying this is dedicated to this one outcome. It's much more doable for the brain. You want to basically have a proactive rather than a reactive week. You want to put yourself in not a sympathetic state, right? CommTech is ideally designed to keep you in a ventral vagal state where the brain has full access to executive functions like logic and empathy. Those are super, super important. And also, when you're designing these RPM blocks, do a little reflection at the end of the day. Do a little reflection of what you did, what you accomplished, what went well, and what you need to improve on for the next day. Again, you're not measuring yourself against somebody else today, but rather who you were yesterday. That's the best measurement you can do.
Yeah, you talked about not being reactive, right? So you want to plan ahead, you want to respond, you want to be in a calm state. As you mentioned, you're not calm, you're actually decreasing your ability to think, your cognitive function, prefrontal lobe. We also want to, kind of help people design a week where they have time, they built in the week time for responses, time for flexibility in something that's not, I'm thinking in French, prévisible. So it's something that you cannot see right now, right? So how can you also plan the time for the unplanned time? And for instance, what's good in your week, and we might be talking also, very specifically to people that are doing, hybrid or remote work. We know that doesn't cover every type of profession and work. Some people have, more still 9 to 5 office type of work or working outside. But if you have flexibility in your schedule, and even if you're at the office, or even if you're a gardener or someone working, in construction or whatnot, you can still design your week for your mindset and your action to be capable to, right? I'm in the construction. I have some tasks to do, but how am I going to do them in a way that's meaningful and purposeful? And make sure the quality and the quantity of my work is good, and also communicate, right? So we are in a time where our colleagues, our bosses, our organizations understand that, we are not living in a completely productivity mindsets like the industrial era, where we know that there's human resources, that there's strategic human resources, there's use to think about people as people, not as numbers and just employees. And when you have that communication with your colleagues, then it can be clearer to say, well, I work better this way. I need this time block for this. And when you communicate that, then you create the space for you to have deep work and such. And also to come back to, some books and some studies, I found some interesting book review called Deep Work. And so it's a scientific paper talking about Cal Newport's first book, which was in 2016. And this review is in 2018.
A huge hit, by the way. Deep Work is really a big book at the time. And I think Newport was a software developer himself who struggled with productivity. And that's what led him to write the book in the first place.
This book review is for, Deep Work. It's called Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World. And that was in 2016, and in this paper, 2018. So if you think the world was distracted in 2016, imagine 10 years later. We are more distracted than ever. And this is an interesting article. If you don't want to read the whole book, take a look at this small article, and I highlighted some section to share with you, Mark, and to the audience. So one of the things that was interesting is that the nature of work is primarily shallow in nature, right? So it doesn't warrant intellectual abilities. Most of the work you do is pretty menial. We increasingly lose our capacity to perform cognitively challenging work. So, and this is what we call deep work. So there's deep work and shallow work. We still have to do shallow work. We still have to, get things done. But the less we are able to plan and do deep work, the less we're actually able to do it. It's not only that we need to plan it, we need to exercise it like a muscle. he talks about deep work is becoming increasingly rare at exactly the time when it's becoming valuable in our economy.
What does he mean in the first sentence that the nature of work is primarily shallow and does not warrant intellectual abilities? Is he speaking for most work nowadays is just it's just cognitive horsepower, get it over with. It's not very intellectually, like, what does he mean exactly with that first sentence?
He's talking about, in your week, in your day, if you really look at, as we talked about being reactive, responsive, right? You can react to an email, to something, right, pretty quickly. Did you take the time to read, to reflect, to think it over? If you're not sure, ask someone that's an expert in that. If you're using AI, ask the AI and double check and ask and figure out and think. No, that's, when he means shallow work is that, and even if, yes, AI can help some thinking, but even in the deep thinking mode of AI, it still has some limitation, right? It still is missing often the context or some subtleties. Of shallow is basically that we're doing things that humans can do, everyone can do. What can you do, Mark, that's better than other humans? And that's when deep work comes in.
So what are the prerequisites for doing deep work? What's the difference between deep work and flow state? Because I've always heard about flow state from Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the guy with the crazy Hungarian last name.
Yeah. So I would say that deep work is very similar to flow state. The difference, from my understanding, is that the flow state is something that, your neural pattern and wave and your psychology is in a timeless flow state, where deep work is more like a mode, or you might or might not be in the flow state while doing deep work, but you're engaging in the activity without necessarily having. You can be in flow state and shallow work as well, is what I would say.
Okay.
You'd be more, like we talk about, having more ROI, doing something that is the 20 instead of the 80.
Got it. Okay. Well, that sounds interesting. I think the last part of that is also especially interesting, that the ability to perform deep work is becoming increasingly rare at the same time when it is becoming increasingly valuable in our economy. It almost makes me think that we're being conditioned in a way by the demands of the environment to do work that is inherently shallow. And that becomes very difficult because the environment also demands a lot of complex cognitive tasks from us, right? That we can't compete with AI. We just can't. Like, AI will always win a million times over and over again. So the nature of work is perhaps changing. More creative work is becoming perhaps more valued rather than the rote tasks that AI is just better at and can do for low price.
We had an episode on AI versus the brain, and there are some things that the brain can still do, and AI can do creativity as well, and is more creative than the average human. But it's also the context where we have a brain that evaluates and that forgets. AI doesn't really forget. We do. That can be painful and useful and sometimes, right? So we can do different things. But we can think also about the Google effect, right? Some people started to Google everything and they don't need to retain any knowledge. Some people are using Google Maps and they don't know how to go anywhere without Google Maps. They're lost. They don't have the sense of direction. People forget phone numbers because you save your phone number. Decades ago, you had to remember your friends or your own or your parents' phone number. People don't even know their own phone number now. All those things are creating efficiencies, but in terms of neurology, it's creating a lazy brain that doesn't know how to deep work anymore. And if we go to the next quote of the article, there's a few things here that I highlighted, right? So learning hard things quickly. This is the idea of deep work. It's like finding that bandwidth to do something difficult and hard, not shallow, not something that actually requires you to think and figuring out how to solve that. So they talk about deep work is a deliberate practice. We want to plan it in our week. We want to plan it in our day. And like you mentioned, deep work is not 15 minutes. It's a few hours. It can be chunked and it can have some pause, but it has to be something that is, a core component of your week. And that will allow you to have a deliberate practice of going into those deep work mode and state. Another part talks about the 6 stages of the book, which are decide on your deep philosophy, ritualize, so that means practice, make grand gestures, do not work alone, right? So sometimes, as we know in remote work environment, we get stuck and we get demotivated. Actually, we do need to work alone, but if you have also the ability to collaborate and if you have the need, don't feel that you always need to work alone. I had the comment with, one person in our team lately, we're a team. If you need help, ask. Don't be shy. Don't be afraid to show that you don't know this. No one knows everything, right? So don't work alone. Execute like a business and be lazy sometimes, right? We're allowed to do deep work, but we're also allowed to be lazy. And it's always a balance. And the last part I wanted to highlight is that we eliminate the ability of behaviors that hijack your attention. This is what's going on. We're being hijacked. And it's not only the technology, it's also our behaviors that are actually causing us to be hijacked, trying to multitask, trying to do things in not shallow waters and not go into the deep work.
What sort of behaviors specifically do you think are hijacking this process?
Any types of distracting behaviors could be, of course, looking at social media, but could be looking at TV, could be looking at the bird outside, whatever thing that you're actually feeling that's distracting you because you don't want to focus on that. Make sure that you're aware of it so that you can slowly build a habit. And because it's a habit, it's a practice to build in that deep work.
Right. Exactly. It's something that can be trained like a muscle, but it seems to have just gone lost over time.
So lastly, I just wanted to reference the two books. So this paper talks about the first book, Deep Work, but there's also Digital Minimalism, both by Cal Newport. Not perfect books by any means, but good starts if you want to have some insights. Other things that I noticed from the book, he mentions in Digital Minimalism to write letters to yourself. And we talked about writing being a process that kind of helps cognition and synthesizing. And writing to yourself also can help for motivation. Prioritizing demanding leisure activities, meaning, you can have leisure, but it can also be demanding. And create something tangible in the physical world, right? Like we mentioned with the RPM, like create, do, action. And then, or we talked about contribution, right? What can you contribute into the world? And then leave the phone at home sometimes and spend time alone as well, right? So you can be collaborating, but also make sure that you have some time to think deeply. Last point, he talks about clutter is costly. Optimization is important, right? So we only have enough energy and time, and we have to optimize. Technology can help or hinder. It's up to us to choose how to make that happen.
You wouldn't want to see my desk right now. It's just cluttered everywhere. It's not a very good deep work environment. Minimalism for sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, just the environment that you work in also has a huge effect on your ability to focus. If you get your own office in order, if you just clean it a little bit, it does improve the ability to have this sort of deep work.
And my office is okay, but I have always too many tabs on my browsers. So yeah, I still have some work to do.
Yeah, that's also a big problem with me. But again, when I'm doing this list, I really try to close all tabs. I block all the sites. I keep my phone in the other room. I try to be as strict as possible with myself and unrelenting as well. And I say, I will not, 90 minutes, I'm just focused to this thing. And that's the best. I found also that like my attention, my focus is best in the morning, right after I wake up. And then it starts waning around, I'd say 1 p.m. That's when I need to go for a walk outside. I don't think you can see, but there's a trampoline behind me in my room. And I put on some, hip hop and I start jumping on this trampoline and I look at the poster in front of me and I'm really I have a vision board and I'm just visualizing the future that I want. Something that Tony Robbins said is that like your physiology, it determines your state. So if you're just feeling bored, down, just like you have to change your state, which means you have to get up, start jumping, listening to some music, you get yourself pumped up. It actually makes a huge difference for me. And it's my personal go-to every time that I start to get a little unmotivated. It's not 100% possible to just go find a group and just work together. So a lot of people are working from home. So the question is like, how do you compete when the rest of the world is also doing the same thing, working from home? It's like, okay, well, you need to perhaps just change your state because most of the world, they're just working like this. They're just staring the entire day. They're not changing their body at all, right? Just because you're like this every 30 minutes or so, you can get up and just jump up and listen to one song and just really visualize what you want in your life.
Oh, it makes me want to come and jump on your trampoline. That's fun.
Yeah. And the thing was fun. Yeah. When I got it, I was a little worried my head would hit the ceiling, but luckily I still have some room there.
And yeah, we have some people in our sales team, in our sales meeting on the treadmill during the calls. And, we encourage and desks that are adjustable to be standing. And so those are actually affecting also. And that's how you can design your read better, right? So that includes mental wellness, physical wellness, and they're all tied in a holistic way.
So I wanted to perhaps change the topic for a moment, because we talked about these really proactive ways to schedule your week. And that the topic is, for today, how can we best schedule our week? What would you say is reactive scheduling? I think most people are in a reactive state, which is a Slack notification comes up or email or something. They have a thought or that like, oh man, I didn't type up that report. I have to respond to that one colleague. And they attend to that thing, which just completely disturbs whatever flow, whatever deep work that they had going on. I think most of the world by default, and because of the demands that the environment places on us, is working in this sort of reactivity state. Do you think so? What do you think?
And I would even say that, most people have at least some meetings planned in the week, and most people don't even come prepared to meetings. So they're reactive in the meeting instead of being proactive before the meeting, saying, hey, I want this from this meeting. I'm going to share this and ask this. And right. And those are all things that when you want to plan your week, Monday to Friday, Monday to Sunday, or Monday to Thursday, whatever time you want to allocate for work, or you can plan your life the same thing. How do you design those times to be more proactive than reactive? What do I want to accomplish at the end of this day? What do I want to contribute to my colleague, to my family, to my community? How do I need to break it down to make it work proactively?
Is it crazy to suggest just closing Slack completely for 2 hours and just saying, no, I'm focused on this, closing your email for 2 hours, just saying having one tab open, your singular focus is just that one tab. Sometimes like when you get into deep work, you lose a sense of self. You become the task.
Craftsmanship as well, right? When you're in that level of craftsman, you're enabling. And yes, you need to close Slack, your phone, other tabs, all this to be in that state. That's okay. And your colleagues should encourage that. And you should, your colleagues do the same.
So I wanted to refer to one study from 2025. So this is really just the price tag of employee burnout. And when I refer to burnout, I'm really talking about being in this reactive state that I had alluded to before. This is a very cognitively draining state to be in, because you are using a lot of mental horsepower to just try to do a lot of different things at once. So according to the study, it's 2025 study from CUNI, I think Columbia University, New York, the Graduate School of Public Health. This is done in February 2025, so roughly a year ago, quantifies that the burnout costs of an 1,000 employee company roughly equates to $5.04 million annually. For an individual executive, the cost of disengagement and burnout is estimated at $20,683 per year. I'm a little curious how they actually quantify. That could be like opportunity cost. Like if you're working in sales and you're burned out and you're not doing as much like cold calling or emailing, that could be quantified as like lost deals, opportunity cost because of burnout. But I think because it's difficult to measure, a lot of people don't really recognize this as a real problem. Like, for example, I was on a sales call yesterday and I was talking about, digital distraction and productivity with this person I was calling, and they're a senior HR representative at a company that has 80,000 followers on LinkedIn. And she's like, yeah, I guess it could be a problem, but it's not really on my radar. We also don't really know how to measure it. And I think the problem is that the fact that you can't measure it makes people just negate it in the first place, neglect it. So,
but when you talk to those people, they acknowledge that there is something, even though they cannot measure it, right?
Yeah. And most people, they've heard it through the grapevine, but they don't really think it's a real issue at their company. And again, it's kind of like the hidden cost of drinking water that's polluted, right? And everybody's drinking polluted water. Everybody has a lifespan of 50 years. So what's the big deal? Right? But then if you drink clean water, then you realize what you've been kind of doing this entire time. So a lot of people, they just take it for granted that this is the world we live in and that there's perhaps nothing that can be done about it.
Well, it doesn't have to take 50 years, right? So you see employee turnover, you see productivity rates. You might not be able to measure some things directly, but others are quite, clear. And, what do you have to suggest to those HR leaders? What can digital wellness do and help?
So what I was speaking to this senior HR leader about specifically yesterday were the digital resets that we offer. Currently, we are reaching out to a lot of organizations, specifically people who work in HR, people operations, talking about, if you do have a company, if you work at a company that's remote first, your employees are working for the most part by themselves in front of a computer screen all day long. The real difficulty becomes, how do I know how much time my employees working on the computer versus how much time they're on non-work related tasks, like looking at YouTube, Reddit, TikTok, all those stuff. That is a hidden cost that a lot of people in HR don't realize. It's a huge hidden cost. And one of the things that we do at AWE is first we do an audit, of the company to understand, okay, what are the current self-report measures amongst employees, about how many hours a day are they spending on their devices. And after that, we actually do a digital reset. This is an online reset. Our team of experienced clinicians, psychotherapists, coaches, psychologists actually have designed specifically for remote workers so that they get the most bang for their buck, the most ROI on the amount of time that they're spending on their computer per day. So if you're watching this and you work in HR and you're like, okay, this is interesting, feel free to reach out to us to learn a little bit more about what this program really is, because we've seen some big returns. We've seen some huge improvements in productivity from the workshops that we've already offered. And it's just a matter of time before people acknowledge that this is a problem that it should be taken seriously.
Well, thanks for sharing, Mark, because these are things that we're actually seeing in the workplace and in different environment. And yes, we do have some quite interesting solutions, evidence-based, to help your team achieve those results. And not, let's be clear, not by monitoring them, not by spying on them, by giving them purpose and meaning and ways to connect, plan, and be motivated at work. Right?
100%. Yeah. I did want to mention one other thing, that the article that I referenced before, they used a computational model to run a simulation, and they just saw that an hourly non-manager employee going through burnout would cost an employer on average $3,999, and those costs would be on average $4,257 for a salaried non-manager, $10,000. So basically, if we were to assume that there would be a 1,000 employee company, the typical distribution would equate to $5 million total for the entire company in wasted burnout costs. So 5 million is a big number, guys. 5 million is a number that will be ringing in the minds of a lot of managers when they hear this. And just think about the hidden cost of distraction and what that's costing your company every single year. 5 million. If you have a 1,000 person company, on average, you are costing the company $5 million by not taking this problem seriously. So just saying.
And there's really, so many things we can do for individual, for organizations. We talk about a week, we can talk about a month, we can talk about a day, but let's, talk about the weekly architecture. Can you have team days, right? This day is more dedicated for this is for this, but not just one meeting, like the whole day. All right. The problem is that you have one meeting from this, one meeting from this, one meeting, 3 different meetings, 3 different things the same morning, then you're not focused, right? So how can you plan your week a little better? Also, we talked last week about energy management, energy mapping. You talked about the RPM, 50 minutes. What is your energy? What is your thoughts? What is this? Other ways that we can conceptualize and help remote workers, right? And define for you and your team, what's an intentional week? So what's the intention and how are we going to get there together?
Yeah. Like what are you actually trying to achieve? What's the outcome? The team outcome and also the individual outcome amongst every employee there.
And deep work is about actually creating value, right? So creating value for the company, for the organization, for yourself, for society, contributing. We can definitely have much more. As we just mentioned, it is becoming a very rare commodity around people and workers and even organization, right?
100%. Yeah. It's becoming more and more difficult by the day. And I think attention, like you said, is the biggest commodity that we are really dealing with nowadays. And it's just becoming more and more scarce, which leads people to look for short-term fixes, i.e. prescription medications or drinking ungodly amounts of coffee per day, all because they're feeling desperate and pressured. I think generally this is a sentiment in the United States, at least. There's a lot of people who are worried about losing their job if they weren't to work hard enough. They either be replaced by AI or replaced by somebody who is working harder than them. So that just pushes them even more to the brink of their own abilities.
Yeah, and so people, to work more strategically, to give more output with sometimes maybe working less in terms of time, but deeper, better. And, those are the reason why we have these reset programs, is to help, organization understand that we can take a pause to, do like you do at home with your trampoline, right? To bounce back higher, right? So that's what we can do with the reset.
100%.
You mentioned morning, evening, night. What do you suggest people to do in their week? If, we know we're talking to mostly remote workers, how is it that we can work on weekends, work at night, work all the time? What would you say would be a good suggestions to people and employers about work schedule?
Firstly, sleep schedule is really a huge priority for me, at least. Going to bed at 10:30 latest every night, waking up maybe 6:30, 7. I want to get 8 hours of sleep. Otherwise, I'm just feeling, it just causes a lot of problems for me throughout the day if I'm not prioritizing my sleep. Secondly, I just try to take advantage of the morning, because I know that's like where the batteries are the fullest. And I just need to really dial down and do the most important, maybe the most cognitively demanding tasks, the most important decisions. Those come in the morning. And then in the afternoon, if I can, I'll go to the gym, right? Because I know that my focus is waning. I'll go for a walk. I'll do something to recharge a little bit. And then I come back in the evening, and then I, jump on the trampoline a little bit. And then I come back and I do something. And because of the time schedule, I'm located in Europe, I start to do my cold calling usually around 3 p.m. I do that for a few hours until 7, 8 p.m. And then usually just reflect on the day. And yeah. If I'd say planning ahead of time, the day before, the night before, to reflect on what well that day, what achievements you had, what can be improved for tomorrow, and then to plan the next day so that you don't wake up just in a reactive state. It's like, oh shit, it's 11 a.m. What should I do? It's like, no, you have your entire day planned. This can be really difficult if you are working alone. You don't have like a manager breathing down your neck saying like, Christian, come on, do the report. But like, it's up to you to decide your own schedule. So you have to become your own manager before you can even manage other people.
Great tips, Mark. I appreciate the insight. And, in terms of what we can reflect, you mentioned like planning ahead. And we also know you talked about sleep, right? We also know that our memory is encoded mostly during sleep. So for long-term memory, right? And so you want to, before going to bed, as you mentioned, recap, reflect, and then be ready proactively for the next thing. I really love those insights. And by the way, we're preparing, some freebies on our website. Our marketing team's going to have a daily 2-2-1 practice soon that also helps people be happier, more focused, and all around, when you're happy and your team is happy, teams that are happy, it's contagious, and it's also more productive, and you get people with smiles and laughter. And there's ways to incorporate that in your business and in your life as well. I always not only like to talk about happiness, I just like to be happy, and that's contagious as well. Any last remarks? And also anyone live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, if you have any questions as we're wrapping up, please feel free to ask on the chat. Any further thoughts, Mark, at this point?
Less is more. That's what I would say. Less is more. And essentially I've seen like these productivity or like gurus of sometimes entrepreneurs taking screenshots of their calendar and it's just completely full with stuff. Like that's not the goal. Like I'd be happier just doing 2 or 3 things really well per day, rather than trying to do 1,000 things. And learning to say no is like the biggest superpower.
Wow, completely agree. Thanks for those personal reflections. Awareness is always key. We talk about it. We name our company about it. Awareness of what works, what doesn't work, reflection, deep thinking, deep work. That's what we're all about. And, I'll ask anyone listening here, what's one thing that you can do to design your week better? Starting in February coming, how can you design your 4 weeks of February a little bit better? And we are having guests in February for our new podcast. So looking forward to see you guys soon.
Are we allowed to share who's the guest going to be?
Not yet. There's going to be
surprise. So surprise. You guys will just have to stay tuned. But it's somebody really exciting from a big company. We won't name names. Yeah.
So, remember, we have natural rhythms. We have to respect our emotions or thought. And also we have to help ourselves because we can tend to be lazy or procrastinate or be overwhelmed or distracted. So, design your week, use calm in it, use awe, use, what we have in store for free or paid services. Please contact us to help you individually or your teams. And any closing thoughts before we prepare for the next week?
Yeah, you don't have to feel like you're alone in this journey, right? There are resources out there. We do offer a free digital reset on Tuesdays, and check out All Digital Wellness for help. There's also a lot of apps out there that you can try out. So don't just assume that this is the way life is, right? There are solutions. There's a solution for every problem out there.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for all the listeners. I hope that was useful, and looking forward to a bit more deep work today. And see you tomorrow, Mark, and see you everyone next week.
All right. See everyone next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week for more awe and awesome conversations. Make sure to follow us and comment on your thoughts on this week's topic. I'm your happiness expert and co-host, Christian Dominic. Please find and reach out to us directly and visit our website at awedigitalwellness.com. See you next time. Thanks for your curiosity. Looking forward to your comments, and keep on smiling.